Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AESQ AS13100 deployment question and answer session. So welcome everyone in every time zone around the world. We have over 170 people registered from 23 countries for this event. We are going to record today's webinar, and we will distribute the video link following the close of today's session. We will post it on the AESQ website also for free viewing. We will be taking questions today during the webinar using the chat feature, and we will talk about that again later. We do ask that everyone remain on mute during the presentation. Now you might ask, how can you contribute during the session? We are going to use SlidePolling for a couple of questions throughout the presentations. So if you're able to access SlidePolling, feel free to click in there and add your response. If for some reason you can't access the SlidePoll, we will have the question on the screen, and just type the answer into the chat box and we'll monitor it that way. And I'm going to introduce Jim Wilson now. Jim?
Hello, good evening and good morning, I guess. My name is Jim Wilson. I work for Pratt & Whitney Canada from here in the Phoenix area. I will be playing host for the questions that are coming in today. We are here to answer questions, so please use the chat function to submit questions. We've been gathering questions before this meeting, so we do have some to start with, but if anything is on your mind that you'd like to ask a question of the group, I will be monitoring it, and if it's a reasonable question, we'll get one of our people to give you an answer as best possible, okay?
Thank you, Jim. And my name again, it's Becky Lemon. I'm the Industry Program Manager at the SAE and supporting the AESQ. And I will be supporting Jim and the rest of the speakers during today's webinar. So the AESQ supplier forums are typically held twice a year. We typically move them around the world between North America, Europe, and Asia. This year, we're still in the remote virtual world, so we're coming to you through the online virtual world platform. But these supplier forums, they're an opportunity for everyone. They provide updates on the work of the AESQ. They're an opportunity to share best practice, to provide feedback to the AESQ, and to develop a network of practitioners and subject matter experts. And everyone is aware that we did publish the AS13100 standard back in March of 2021. Shortly thereafter, we published 13 reference manuals to support deployment of the standard, and we're going to talk to you about all of those items today. So today's agenda, we're going to start off with an overview of the AESQ, its vision and objectives, presented by Barbara Negroe from GE Aviation. Barbara is also the chair of the AESQ strategy group. Then we'll move on to an overview of the AS13100 standard, presented by Larry Bennett from GE. Jim Wilson from Pratt & Whitney is going to be our moderator today for our question and answer session. And then Jen Sakai will present future events scheduled by AESQ, and Barbara will lead us through a summary and wrap up towards the end. So this is just a reminder, if you have questions, please type them into the chat function, and we will reference that as a resource when we get to that part of the presentation. So I'm going to turn this over to Barbara Negroe. She is the Executive Sourcing Quality Leader at GE Aviation and the Chair of the Aerospace Engine Supplier Quality Strategy Group. Barbara?
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. As Becky said, I'm the current chair of AESQ, the Aero Engine Supplier Quality Strategy Group. And we're happy to be with you in the Asia time zone to be able to talk to you about the standard that's been released, some of the good work that the AESQ and its members are doing, and to answer any questions that you have. Next slide. For many on the phone, AESQ is a known entity. You may have even joined us in a supplier forum before, but for others, this may be something new for you. And so I'm going to do a brief reminder of, where we started, why we started, who we are, and what our expectations are for the industry. So the Aero Engine Industry Burning Platform, a few years ago, back in 2013, there was and really still is a burning platform that led to the collaboration of several OEMs and suppliers to get together and determine how do we address this together. Use the automotive example of QS9000 with Ford, GM, and Chrysler as the model. So those burning platform questions were the fact that airline passengers were set to double in size over the next 20 years. Our customers expect 0 defects, and that includes the flying customer. Increasing levels of supplier-made engine content, move from make to buy within the engine OEMs. And our global supplier footprint continues to expand. We're on the phone right now with another global audience. Large number of common suppliers between the engine manufacturers, wide range of aerospace engine supplier businesses. Some are very, very small with just a few, 10 people working for the company, just a little bit of revenue, maybe a family-owned business, all the way up to greater than $2 billion and multiple sites and thousands of people. So we really do have a wide range of aerospace suppliers in our base. And then improving quality, cost, and delivery remains a key challenge for us all. Next page. So the team got together from an AESQ perspective and said, how do we prevent defects and what is our intention? Our key quality tools of 0 defects include many of the standards that we have since published, and we'll show you that later on as how it all works together. But it does work as a system, and that's really what our intention is here. This is actually a link to a video that we're not going to show today, but we highly encourage and have a link for it in both the AESQ website and at the end of this presentation. Highly encourage that you watch it and use it for not only your own business, but your sub-tiers to help everyone understand how these tools work as a system, and they function very, very well when they're used in that way. Next slide. The purpose of the AESQ is pretty simple. It's to simplify and standardize the aero engine supplier requirements through the removal of duplication and waste, create a common language for quality, build in existing industry standards where they exist. We don't want to replicate things, we want to build upon them. Create requirements that are simple, prescriptive, and auditable. Promote the use of standardized third-party training. Deliver results with pace, and focus on effective deployment and improving the capability of the shared supply chains. Next slide. The AESQ is made up of 10 voting member companies. These voting member companies, as you can see on this page, include OEMs and major suppliers in our industry. GE Aviation, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, Safran Aircraft Engines, MTU Aero Engines, GKN Aerospace, Honeywell Aerospace, Howmet Aerospace, IHI, and PCC Structurals are the 10 voting members. So everything that happens within the AESQ is voted upon with these member companies. We also have additional members, non-voting, but have joined the group to participate and add value to our standards and what we do. And that is Cincinnati Thermal Spray, CPP, Consolidated Precision Products, and Meggitt PLC. Next page. These are the voting members from each of those companies that you saw on the previous page. hopefully you recognize several of these. I can tell you that these are a group of outstanding individuals that selflessly add value and are very passionate about the aerospace industry and how they can and how we can simplify, improve quality, and create more of a holistic approach amongst our companies. Next page. The vision of AESQ, so we talked about the purpose, and the vision is to establish and maintain a common set of quality requirements that enable the global aero engine supply chain to be truly competitive through lean, capable processes and a culture of continuous improvement. And hopefully you'll see from what we talk about today that that's exactly what we've tried to do. So how does this all fit together? I'm going to talk about really quickly what the industry looked like in 2012 at the beginning of this journey. So we have regulatory requirements, we have customer requirements, we also have industry requirements. Those industry requirements are made up of NADCAP, various IAQG standards, ISO, et cetera. So these all flow down into the aero engine manufacturers, which are, for example, Big Four, Rolls-Royce, GE, Pratt & Whitney, and Safran. And we each have our own standards that incorporate all of the above and some engine OEM specific standards that we then flow down into our supply base, which coincidentally is a similar supply base to our OEM partners. So you as a aero engine supplier are receiving various standards that ultimately reflect similar aspects of specifications. So the idea here is, okay, how can we simplify this process and create something a little bit more standardized for our supply base? Next page. To do that, at the start, the team started looking at, of those different standards across the OEMs, where can we harmonize? So where can we pull out common language, close to common language, have a conversation about it, consolidate into a single standard, and then issue this standard and remove our own individual language. And so a lot of work was done by cross-functional teams over the last few years related to the various AS standards, 13,004, 3, 6, 2, 13,001, et cetera. So these standards were all published and with the goal of making this a simpler supply chain. What we then said is, okay, so we have all of these standards. How do we simplify further? Let's take all of these, since we're really going pretty far into the common language across the OEMs, pull these together in a common standard. Let's go through what's left in our own individual standards and see what more we can commonize. And from that was born AS 13100, in addition to incorporating some of the newer industry requirements like AS 9145 and incorporating that into a single standard. So this is our evolution in terms of simplification, from each completely individual requirement to multiple commonized specifications to where we are today as a one single standard across the aero engine supply base. Next page. Across the various times we've been able to get together in person, and if you were able to watch the video, which I hope you all were, the video of our virtual supplier forum that included some best practices from GKN on their deployment, we often like to highlight some supplier best practices at the forums related to some of the different standards or the way we all look for some of the work to be done. So these are just some examples in the past where a supplier has come and kind of shown their best practice. We're always interested in this and looking for best practices. We feel like it's good to hear from OEMs, but it's even better to hear from your fellow suppliers on how they've executed kind of had an aha moment around a specification and a way to do things better. Next page. So to continue to discuss our evolution and AS 13100, what it means, how we got there, and how it's been deployed, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Larry Bennett, consulting engineer for our global sourcing quality team at GE Aviation. Larry?
Thank you, Barbara. Privileged to be with you today and talk a little bit about the AS 13100 structure, some key highlights. Next, please. So before we begin talking about the standard, let me just lay a little bit of framework and a little bit of personal passion. So you know, we started this journey on 13100 in August of 2018. I was asked by Barbara if I would be interested in joining a team to try to standardize and commonize the quality system requirements across the Aero Engines group. And to say that I was excited was an understatement. So if you go back in time before I came to GE in 2005, for about the 15 years before that, I was a supplier quality manager in the supply chain with customers just as you have today. And managing a quality system that had requirements from all of the primes and all of the OEMs and all of the regulations. And so if you put that all together, it made for quite a challenge to try to manage each of those customer requirements. And I'm sitting there in the spirit of lean, as we call it today, trying to understand why the industry couldn't come together and agree on a set of requirements. And so after asking for that for 15 years of my career, to be asked to help solve that, absolutely, emphatically, yes. And so that started the journey at Rolls-Royce headquarters in 2018 with a group of us in a conference room for a week. And we started the journey, and we were privileged to be able to publish this, as Becky said, in March of 2021. So you can see here, you have the regulators, the customers, the industry, then you have all of the aero engine manufacturer requirements. And I actually put all the requirements together in a stack as a visual display for the team. And it measured somewhere in the ballpark of 7.5 to 8 inches tall when you try to put all the requirements together that an organization is trying to manage. And so that really was the spirit of the and the impetus for the change. Next. And so you see on the left, you've got the individual requirements, Sabre, ASQR 01, Safran Safe, and GE's S1000. That was our starting point with the existing AS 13000 series documents. We turned those into a unique AS 13100 standard. And on the right-hand side, we still have some leftover requirements from each of the Aero Engines OEMs, but the key takeaway there is we have reduced the number of requirements by 50%. And I know there are those that say we really didn't reduce requirements, we just kind of shuffled them. That's really not true. Because again, if you're trying to manage individual companies and individual customer requirements that are some duplicative, some additional, there's no way that you can't say that the requirements were not reduced. And we're privileged and pleased to advertise that number, and we truly stand by it. And then on the bottom right is that reference manuals that we will continue to speak about, we'll continue to emphasize, because they really are the roadmap of how to comply. The standard is the requirements, but the guidance material, the reference manuals, is the recipe for how to get there. Next. And we also want to continue to play on the AS 9100 structure. And the 9100 team is pleased with that. We've had separate meetings with the leadership team for the AS 9100 writing team. And they were very pleased that we didn't create a new structure and a new numbering scheme. We played on the AS 9100 structure, and we added requirements to that, keeping that framework. Next. And again, we do have those leftover requirements. It was impossible, I'll say. We really tried hard to minimize the amount of customer-specific requirements. But there were just some things that each of the OEMs, in this case, Rolls and GE and Pratt and Safran, felt they needed to keep either from an IP or from an IT standpoint, that they just needed to maintain those for the first iteration. We will continue to work to try to move those into the requirements, and hopefully we'll be able to do that and rationalize more of this in the next version. But each of the Aero Engines OEMs are committed to simplification, and we're committed to try to further take away the leftover customer-specific requirements. Next. But this time, Becky, I'll turn it over to you, I believe, for a poll question.
Thanks, Larry. So I'm launching the first Slido poll. There may be a few people that may not be able to access the Slido poll. If you can't access it, don't worry, just type your answer into the chat feature. But our first poll question is, which organization type best describes your organization? And we have several choices there. So if you can see the Slido poll, go ahead and click your choice. If you can't, just type it into the chat box. Type your answer into the chat box. Some of you may see a green Slido button at the bottom right of your screen that you might need to click on first. I see some votes coming in. So we'll give it a few more seconds here to enter your responses. Looks like we have a couple of different responses. Make to print has a few votes. Type 2A has a few votes. Raw material. Type 2A seems to be fairly popular, design and manufacture. So thank you everyone for participating in our first slide there. I'm going to close this slide and we'll continue on.
Okay, if we could just hang on that slide for just a moment. I want to talk for just a moment about the different organizations. And let me preface that by saying that our regulators, our FAA in the United States and your regulators in your local area will be pleased with this chart and this organization structure. The reason they like that is because it clearly shows what requirements apply and are set to each type of organization. So if you are a raw material supplier, if you're a make to print, if you're a design responsible organization, it clearly shows you which sections apply and which sections do not apply from a compliance standpoint. And it makes it easy to oversee, and it makes it easy to assess the organization's status relative to each of those requirements. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, it clearly also shows, based on those organization types, what is the QMS approval required for those types of organizations. So we feel really good about the structure of these two charts that talk about organization types and organization QMS approval required. Next. So walk through a few of the highlights from the requirements. The first thing we want to highlight is the requirement in section 4.3.5 to conduct a compliance assessment of the QMS to ensure that it captures all the requirements of the standard and any customer specific requirements that are still left over from their customer unique requirements document. And this is an annual requirement, but kind of look at this. If you have gone through the exercise of coming to an AS9100 assessment, you had a registration that you were trying to achieve, or through a NADCAP process, one of their audit structures. It's the same kind of principle where you take the standard, you have each of the requirements, and then you show positively how you're meeting that requirement. And that the compliance assessment from RM 13009 has been laid out so that it's an easy to use tool. And we hope and expect and encourage you to be using that. Next. Section 8.3 of the standard includes requirements for design and development. So if you are a supplier design responsible, and we saw some from the survey that we just did, the poll question, that there are some on the call today that have design responsibility. Section 8.3 has some clear guidance, clear requirements, I should say, and RM 13008 provides the guidance for how to achieve and how to comply. Next. Section 8.4 gets into supplier control. This would be as a prime, your suppliers. So sub-tiers to the prime suppliers. And a prime supplier being defined as one that has a PO from an OEM. And we realize, and the industry realizes, and our regulators and our government officials recognize that every degree of separation from us to you, to your sub-tiers, and to your sub-tier is a significant risk area. And that's why a lot of effort and energy was put into controlling sub-tiers. And you can see it covers everything from quality control capabilities, purchasing and planning, product acceptance, supplier surveillance and oversight, supplier monitoring. So there is a full deck in 8.4 talking specifically and narrowly about managing your sub-tiers. And Reference Manual 13007 provides a comprehensive set of guidance for managing suppliers. Next. So it should be pretty evident based on my dialogue and my personal experiences about the benefits. We have a single standard that's aligned to 9100. Less requirements. We're saying more than 50% less. Lower cost. You do not have to buy multiple standards. AS 13001 is free, and AS 13100 will be the only requirements document you'll have to purchase after next year. All of the reference manuals are free. They'll minimize the content of the supplier requirement standards, creating a common language, aligns to relevant industry standards. Barbara mentioned AS 9145. We're also playing on AS 9146. We're also playing on the counterfeit mitigation standards. Supported by global approved training resources, it will enable the OEMs to provide a harmonized approach to your supplier development. Supplier compliance, as I said, continues to be assessed through customer audit and allows AESQ to focus on supply chain capability development. I want to highlight again number 8. Each of you and your compliance will be assessed through individual customer audits. There will be no central point of compliance to this standard. It will still be managed by each of your customers for compliance at this point in time. It's something we're talking about as an industry team. Is there some way we can commonize that customer audit? But for now, it will be each individual customer will be managing compliance to the standard. Next. I'd be remiss not to mention and highlight the significant contributions by the core writing team. Even though we published this in March, I think it's still tangible. You can see the 8 faces on the deck here. They spent tireless amount of time, week after week, from August of 18 up until March of this year, to get this standard across the finish line. And I thank each one of them. And it was a privilege to work with the team to get this done. One other little ad lib I want to make. You know, I was in Hartford for the supplier forum right before the pandemic hit. And, you know, it was discussed at that point. We kind of put a teaser out there that we were going to be publishing this standard soon. And there was a lot of skeptics in the audience. And I can remember one specifically, you know, I had gotten up and given my passion about the standard and how optimistic I was about this getting published. And one person said, "I'll believe it when I see it." And I'd like to have a conversation with that individual today because I was passionate and confident that we would get done. And you know, you can say never. And maybe I was too optimistic, but I'm privileged to say that we got the mission accomplished. Now the hard part is getting this deployed and getting it deployed successfully. And we're privileged as a team of OEMs to partner together to push this forward. Next. And along with that, we had 99 subject matter experts who helped create the reference manuals. And I can't thank them enough for their tireless energy. And a lot of these are staying on and part of the subject matter interest groups to make sure that the reference manuals stay current and appropriate. Next. And again, just to highlight and emphasize those reference manuals, you can see a link on the slide. They provide industry best practices. And as I said, the subject matter interest groups will maintain those and will update those as necessary. We've actually had a couple of them, I think, already been published with revision. Next. This is a very, very useful tool. Our deployment team, led by Elizabeth Pace and a team of many, is continuing to maintain this compliance plan. This is your roadmap to success. You can see that we've got green through August of 2021, and you can see the toll gates and the milestone. We should be at 6, performing the gap analysis using that AS 13009 document that we talked about. We've had the virtual supplier forms that we're doing now. So somewhere between now and the end of the year, you should be actively working on that gap assessment and see where you are. And if you take this and own it, you will help yourself be successful. Next. So we have a second poll question. Where is your company in the deployment of AS 13100? Recognizing it's a journey, and I realize we've still got a better part of a year plus to go, but you know that calendar's turning fast. So Becky, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Larry. So the Slido poll is open. If you can see the Slido poll, go ahead and click and start voting there. If you can't see the Slido poll, just type your response into the chat box and we'll follow along there. So we'll give everyone about 15 seconds or so to answer the question, where is your company in the deployment of AS 13100? So we have a couple of responses that are at number 1, still trying to figure it out. There's some 2s and 3s coming in. A few more seconds, everyone. Okay, so it looks like most of the votes that have come in are at number 1, still trying to figure it out, but we also have a good mix of 2s and 3s in there where they're performing the gap analysis and updating procedures. So back to you, Larry.
Okay, so I'll just emphasize a couple of points on this slide. One, if you are at number 1 and you really are still trying to figure out what it means, I would encourage you to get that activity done as quickly as you can. Try to hit 2022 with a plan in place and trying to work on that gap analysis. If you're struggling to understand what it means and how it's going to apply to your organization, you need to partner with your customers. And some of the representatives are probably on this phone call, but reach out to your customer and let them help you in the journey if necessary. Because we want you to be at 2 and 3 as quickly as you can get there in 2022. And because if you spend most of 2022, the first 6 months of that, trying to see where you are, you're going to be struggling to be done by the end of the year. Next. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Wilson, Senior Manager, Supplier Quality and Development. Back to you, Jim.
All right, thank you, Larry. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I did forget a little bit when I introduced myself that please, I haven't seen any questions come through the chat yet. Not only are these questions possible that we might get to them today, but good questions will be certainly added to our website as frequently asked questions. The more questions you ask, the more things that we understand are on your minds, the better that we can provide information on the website and even in our presentations and our documentation. All right, so what we're going to do now is we actually have some questions that were gathered before this. There was an open, hey, if you'd like to submit a question before the meeting, go right ahead. So we have a number of different ones. We'll start with Larry, because Larry, you touched on a lot of this. The fact that AS13100 will be called out by the various OEMs quality systems documents, Sabre, AESQ, S1000, whatnot. The question is basically, what is the reality, basically, when are those going to be reduced, and when will this really become a hard requirement for suppliers to be compliant to 13100?
Okay, thank you, Jim. And thank you for the question, whoever submitted that. So I'll start with the second part of that question first, because that's the easiest part to answer. It is required by the end of December 2022. So when you come back from holiday break, assuming you get one at the end of 2022, January 1st, 2023, you are expected to be in compliance with AS 13100. Now, how that happens is each of the OEMs and each of your customers will be flowing down AS 13100 to you. Now, for GE, we're doing that through our S1000 document. So nothing changes from our flow down. Our terms and conditions invokes S1000. S1000 invokes AS 13100 with any exceptions stated right in S1000. Now for GE, we have already implemented AS 13100 and made it a requirement by the end of next year in our April release edition. Now for GE, we added requirements and added pages because we created a scenario where you could still be compliant to today's requirements and have a platform to move to the new requirements. But at the end of next year, our requirements will be reduced significantly from the 60, 70 pages we had down to less than 30 pages by the end of next year. And each of the OEMs has committed to deploying the 13100 as soon as possible.
Yep. Uzam, Rolls-Royce, anything to add about Sabre 4 and the effort what was resulted from that effort?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so Rolls-Royce, similarly to GE, have incorporated 13100 into Sabre 4, which was released in August. So very similar story. We expect people to do the gap analysis, get trained up, and be compliant by the end of next year. And then Sabre 4 compliance is required in line with AS 13100 at the end of next year.
Okay, thank you. Earl, maybe a couple of comments on what's going on at Pratt & Whitney?
So we've also been working very hard to adopt that into AESQ. We're working really closely with our sister companies, formerly Collins and Legacy Raytheon. And if we can't do it with them, then there will be a Pratt & Whitney Canada, Pratt & Whitney America appendix or change to AESQ. But it's definitely going to stay in AESQ and more to come. And hopefully we have that all laid out by the very first month of the next year.
Thank you. Anybody else on the team want to kick in anything before we move on? Okay.
This is Catherine from Safran Aircraft Engine. And we will flow down beginning of next year AS 13100 in our standard safe. And so we will calling it, we are working on the gap analysis at the moment, and we will be flowing down it first trimester 2022.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, if you don't mind, we'll move on. I know, having looked at the questions that came in before this presentation, there is a lot of interest in training and obviously where to get trained, how to get trained, and whatnot. Maybe Lisa, if you don't mind. Will there be classes in AS 13100 and related specs throughout the country? Many people do not learn well in a 4-day Zoom class, and small companies do not have the budgets that include plane tickets. Maybe a little bit on what we're planning for training?
Thanks, Jim, for the question. So there's really 3 levels of training for AS 13100 that are offered or will be offered. The first level is an executive overview. That overview doesn't cost anything. It is online, and it's in a video format. That executive overview is a short 35-minute overview of 13,100. The next level is AS 13100 requirements training. That is a 10-hour class, but the format for that class is it's self-paced. It is online currently. As I said, it's 10 hours, but you can do it in small bites. So you can come and go when you access 13,100 requirements training. You will have access for 365 days to go in and out of the training as you have availability for training time. And then the third level is AESQ Quality Foundations. Now that course will be a 3-day course, and that course will be offered both online and live in person. And let me add that these courses will be available in 7 different languages. The foundations course, that third level, is a 3-day course, and it will be available later this year. So they're nearing the finishing stages of developing that course, and it is due to roll out by the end of this year. So currently there's a mix of formats, but the 13,100 requirements training is currently an online training.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to move to, well, just one small one. Maybe Earl is actively involved with the training planning going on with the AESQ. Earl, it's an interesting question. It may not have an answer right now, but has there an official course for AS 13100 auditors been planned or discussed?
So to date, we have not discussed having training around that. We have the RM that Larry talked about, the reference material, but we haven't really talked about it. But, based on events like this, that would drive that discussion. So thanks for asking the question. And
okay, sticking with the training theme, Catherine, if you don't mind, there's a question here. Where can I find an acceptable class on human factors? Any idea there?
Sorry, can you repeat? I didn't hear very well.
The question from the supplier is, where can I find an acceptable class for human factors? Catherine is our human factors guru, so
yes,
the question goes to her.
Of course, you can find several classes. SAE has, of course, some classes, but also we will try to provide you a set of slides with the team, which I'm leading, a set of slides that you can use inside your company. And we hope it will help you.
Yeah. All right. A question from Jay in the audience today. Maybe Larry, is there going to be a standard forms issued to be used for PFMEA, PFD characteristics, that kind of thing?
So yes, we are, as an industry, we have, let me just take a step back. So I'm, in addition to being part of the AS 13100 writing team, I'm also part of the industry AS 9145 deployment team, where we have worked to create an exhaustive list of templates to use for each of the APQP related activities. PFMEA, control plan, MSA, PFD. So a lot of the core tools and a lot of the required deliverables for APQP, we have standardized, and the AESQ with the reference manuals has leaned on those templates as well. So the commitment is from each of the members that are in this group, the commitment for their representatives on the AS 9145 team is to be consistent so that we don't have a GE flavor and a Rose flavor and a Pratt flavor for each of these documents, that we're all ascribing to consistent templates where there is one available. Now, each company might already have a form they use. As long as it meets the spirit and letter of the template, so be it. But if you don't have one, and if it doesn't meet the expectations of the team, then you are encouraged and expected to use the developed templates.
All righty. Okay, moving to audit of 13,100. There are a lot of questions. This was a very prolific series of questions. And I will put it to the panel who might want to jump in, otherwise I will take care of it. But questions are, when audited by one customer for compliance with AS 13,100, will the results be recognized by other customers? We've talked a little bit about that already. Is there a certificate being issued as a result of the audit? Who is going to audit the AS 13,100 standard? Will the AS 13,100 be attached or connected to the AS 9100 audit, the certification audit? And the last one is, no, I guess that's about it. So then there was a question from the group actually that's listening. In each prime going to do an audit of 13,100 compliance in 2023, if we have 4 primes that flow down AS 13,100, they would all have to conduct an audit.
So let me start. This is Larry. So let me start by saying that the expectation is that the requirement, as we mentioned earlier, is that each organization is required to do an annual assessment using the compliance assessment in RM 13009. So certainly each of your customers could ask to see that as evidence that you have audited your system. That would be the starting point for us. And it might be the starting point for others. I can't speak for each customer you have, but I would think that that would be a viable approach, at least as a starting point. Now, each organization, each customer you have will still be responsible to make sure that you're complying with the requirements. And their means to do that could be an on-site visit, it could be a virtual visit, or it could be leaning narrowly on your own compliance assessment.
Okay. And I will add a little bit to that. Section 925 in AS 13,100 describes an annual audit report. The group that was putting together the internal audit sections that ended up in 13,100, the primary goal of that group over the last 5-6 years as the whole thing's been being put together was to try and minimize the number of audits that we, the customers, the OEMs, were coming in to do on a regular basis. It's just, we know what your pain is. We've heard stories from suppliers about 200 days a year where somebody's in here auditing me, et cetera, et cetera. So we were trying to figure out a way how we could, without sharing data between the various companies, because we are competitors, even though we're working collaboratively here, but how could we figure out a way that suppliers can prove to us that these audit activities have happened during the year for the OEMs or the customers to evaluate to see whether that is in fact enough or not. Sorry, my video went off. So that 925, it describes what's called an annual audit report that each supplier puts together and then presents to their customers. It highlights the internal audits that were done. It highlights any regulatory audits that were done, any AS 9100 type certifications that were done, and possibly if one of us customers came in and do an AS 13,100 compliance audit, again, without sharing data on exactly what was done for that customer, if those annual audit reports are comprehensive enough, then we may decide as a company taking a look at that, okay, instead of going in next year and auditing that supplier, we're going to put it off for a year. We're going to put it off for 2 years. We're going to send them a mail-in audit instead of an on-site audit. That's really the goal of that whole section. So there will be a little bit of, as Larry said, the OEMs are going to need to prove that there is compliance out there in the first little bit. But as we get mature with 13,100, I could easily see where the amount of customer audits specifically for 13,100 will start to drop over the years. It may be a couple of years, but over the years it probably will. All right.
Another aspect of that question was how 13,100 and 9,100 plays. There is no linkage between the two as far as certification, registration, audits, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not yet. Catherine, a question from Jay again. For human factors, will the requirement for SAA repair sites be sufficient? I think we discussed this, but do you have any idea?
Yeah, in fact, for FAA repair, you have specific regulation. So AS 13100 is not giving requirements for this type of sites. So you still need to comply to repair specific repair station requirement, because the regulation is much more complex than what is put in AS 13100. I don't know if I'm clear enough, but you still need to be compliant for repair station related to FAA regulation.
The government wants what the government wants. Yeah. Okay, next question is helping suppliers to flow down. We've talked about having to flow it to sub-tiers and sub-tiers and sub-tiers, and we all acknowledge how hard that is. Maybe Lisa, the question is, will the companies requiring compliance to the standard actually communicate this to their buyers, our buyers, and our engineering departments, who will flow it down to the supplier's salespeople and the supplier's engineering departments? Or will it be up to the quality person at suppliers to find the requirements and link documents and then try to convince management that this has to be done?
So thanks again for this question. It's an interesting question, but essentially, as the OEMs are flowing this requirement to their suppliers, the suppliers will have a contract review process in place. So there will be one contractual place that the requirement will be flown to you as a supplier. And then within your own contract review process, you will make sure that the responsible groups within your organization that are accountable to implement the requirements of the standard receive that through your contract review process. The OEMs don't flow the requirement to different groups in your organizations. They flow it contractually in the contract or the purchase order, depending on how they determine to flow that. So it comes into your organization, and then you would divide up the requirements as needed to the accountable parties through your contract review process.
Okay. All right, I'm going to look at, Mayumi-san has been submitting a bunch of specific questions on some of the RMs. We'll try to get you answers to those very specific questions from the experts that are familiar with those RMs. But his last question is, will you do webinars about RM 13003, 13006, and 13002? Does anybody on the team have any feedback on that? These are on the specifics for, I guess,
what I will say is that there are new communities of practice that have been stood up on the various reference manual topics. So the subject matter experts are in those groups, and those are available through the AESQ website. So you can join a community of practice with subject matter experts to learn more from those who are actually deploying the standard. As far as the webinars, each of those groups is determining what webinars that they're going to host. And other than human factors at this moment, I don't believe that they have a schedule out for the other reference manuals. On this call may know,
No, so Lisa, this is Liz, and within the deployment team, we'll be discussing, like you said, what makes sense for each individual reference manual. We have the webinar set up for the beginning of next year for human factors, and then we'll be looking at the others as well for opportunity. We should be coming out shortly with a list of those that will be available.
And so, Liz, if anyone is interested, they'll be posted on the AESQ website? Is that how they would find out?
So the AESQ website, or I would highly encourage those to join the community of practice through LinkedIn as well. A lot of the communication will be going out that way.
Great, thanks.
All right. Thank you, ladies. and maybe something that just hasn't been, it's not a question, but it hasn't been stated yet, but the plan for the AESQ, when AS 13100 becomes a requirement on December 31st, 2022, the existing AS 13,000 specifications that most of us are calling out today, 13,000, 13,002, 3, 4, 6, they will be disappearing. They are replaced by 13,100, and they will not be maintained after that time period. So in case you were hoping to continue on with what you've got today, that will be a little bit more difficult. There's an interesting question from before the call today. Will sample policies and procedure compliant with AS 13100 be made available for benchmarking? Uzam, maybe?
Jim, just repeat that, please.
Will sample policies and procedures that are compliant to AS 13100 be made available for benchmarking? I think the short answer is I don't believe there's anything in any of our reference material documents today, but I guess I should think about it.
Jim, I think that question is more around examples of deployment, no? You know,
Yes.
Will we see some of the OEMs, you know, and their plans and how they're flowing that out? I mean, I would say for starters, you know, watch the video of the supplier forum that we had. GCAN did a very comprehensive deployment plan showcase where they went through everything that they're, you know, doing as part of their journey. We also had examples from GE and Rolls-Royce on there as well. So, you know, as we start to develop our own plans and move along, we'll be showcasing those.
And it's definitely a possibility that they'll be added to the reference materials. Remember, the AESQ is in charge of these reference materials, and they're free, so they're updatable at any time. When we find a better idea, we'll be updating those things. I imagine that question came from a small company looking to, you know, shamelessly steal from others. There are a couple of questions here from small companies. In fact, there's more than a couple of questions from small companies. Obviously, small companies are concerned about this large document and how it's going to possibly affect their lives. And the questions are about internal audit, but there are a couple of other questions. We're a small company and contract our internal audits. None of the auditing companies I have contacted have any familiarity with this standard. How can we find qualified people to audit us to this standard? And another question was, I work for a small company. How can I find an auditor qualified to perform the internal audits of AS 13100? I guess anybody want to talk about, I mean, there are consultants out there that will be able to pick up the standard and what it requires and then provide services. All right, I will take it that, you know, that again, the internal audit requirements are there to provide suppliers with an exact list of what you should have. And again, the annual audit report will list those out. These are the internal audits we did today. If you need a separate auditor, if you don't have the personnel because you're a small supplier, then I imagine as we start rolling this out by the end of next year, a whole huge list of expert consultants will be available to help you out with your implementation. And really, I think that's what it'll boil down to. We have no, Becky, maybe, we have no plans right now to authorize specific companies to provide services, consultant services or audit services?
AESQ is not involved in that aspect right now, Jim, so that would be correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, I hate to say it, but I think that's pretty close to, well, there's a small question here. Who do we contact regarding errors in the standard? The website is the answer to that question. There's all sorts of feedback opportunities on the AESQ website, and they are brought in. Becky, our wonderful organizer, brings them into our meetings, and we discuss them, and then we issue a response or we incorporate them if we have to.
A link on the cover page of the standard for feedback as well.
Right. All right. The only other one is, again, I think a small, and maybe Larry, you could take it. It's about PPAP on products. Do the customers, do the OEMs expect PPAPs on products that were designed and qualified for 30 years ago and haven't been changed since?
The answer to that is shortly is no. We just posted a FAQ answer on the website to address that topic. We are not looking back. We are looking forward with NPI that is started and delivered after 2023, January. Now, there's always an exception to every rule. And so, you know, your customer might come back and ask for individual elements of a PPAP. They might want a PFMEA, or they might want specific elements. If they've had a delivered quality or have a repeat high risk issue going on, they might ask you to do specific elements of something that's a legacy part. But generally speaking, APQP is looking forward from January forward. So you should have a plan in place to be able to meet any contracts you receive after January 1st, 2023 to meet the APQP formula.
All right, thank you, Larry. The last question I think I have here is, will the AESQ create a reference manual document for risk analysis? And this person suggests using 31,000 as a guide in the new standard. Is there been any discussion, anybody that aware of having an RM to look at risk analysis or risk analysis all through AS 13100, obviously, as there is with 9100?
To my knowledge, that hasn't been discussed. We certainly did add that standard reference that you mentioned in the requirements,
Right.
But we haven't talked about guidance material for that topic to this point. But again, some of the feedback from this forum is it helps us to frame our go-forward plan as well.
And just to add to that, Suzama, I was just reinforcing that, Larry. I think these forums are great to help us understand what you need to help you deploy it as our suppliers. And the deployment team's sole purpose is to help you along the journey. So we don't always live in your shoes. So let us know what you need, and we'll do our best to provide an offering that will help you.
And I would just reiterate again what I mentioned earlier. To those that feel like they're at a 1 and still trying to understand how this applies to them, I really strongly suggest that you rationalize that quickly so you can start understanding where your organization is compliant-wise, so that you can take these kind of forums and come and ask viable questions for your organization. We want to help partner with you as suppliers to be there before you need to be there. But you have to start the journey.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Sam. Okay, unless anybody wants to quickly submit a chat question, I'm out. I can ask a couple questions from the last meeting. Becky, we still have 20 or 17 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, here's one from our last question and answer period. And I will throw it up to the team. What kind of guarantee do suppliers have that the requirements of AS 13100 will remain harmonized? This is our company's biggest concern. We have seen this with FAI requirements for AS 9102. When it was first released, everybody united behind the standard, but over time, everybody started adding their own supplemental requirements. And now every single customer wants their FAIs a little different than everybody else. What will keep the member companies from doing the same thing with AS 13100? Who hasn't spoken yet? Liz, I don't know, back to you. All right, I will take it then. The short answer is that the OEMs didn't get into a room for 6 years to work on a single FAI requirement document after 9102 was published. That's the difference. We have been working together collaboratively, even though we're the competitors, for 6, 7 years now, that I've been involved at least. And the difference is we are all dedicated to this new standard. We all realize what it's like to be a supplier and have all of the individual customer requirements thrown at you that are almost the same, but everybody wants their little thing. This person was complaining about FAIs, and they all want their little thing. By standardizing, we're hoping to make your lives simpler. You only need to be compliant to 13,100, and each one of your customers is going to be happy with that compliance. There will, as Larry said, there will be some company-specific requirements that will remain. We're never going to get away from that, but we've been shooting for having standardized requirements through the vast amount of requirements that existed today before we came up with 13,100.
Okay, just to add to that, this is Lisa. I would just like to add, yes, it's simpler when you're dealing with just one standard versus multiple standards in said in different language. But I think that it's really important that, you know, it's going to benefit everyone in the industry. And we're doing this because it will benefit all of us to have a simpler requirements that's easier to understand, and not have differences amongst our companies, which actually causes confusion at times with suppliers. And we want to eliminate that. So it's in our best interest as well to adopt this single standard and to flow that standard, and to stay aligned so that we are simplifying and clarifying.
Okay.
This is Barbara Negro with GE as well. And I would say the same thing, is that this is, you know, for us, standardization and being able to use an industry standard, being able to maintain and keep up our own unique standards is a benefit to us. Anytime some of our own unique requirements are fed into an industry standard, maybe an IAQG standard or whatnot, you know, we're more than happy to capitalize on that and take that into consideration, because it does help. So I appreciate the question. And, you know, we can only promise that the member, and you saw the member companies and the voting members are all passionate about this and are committed to working with each of you as we deploy the 13,100 standard.
All right, I think I'm done there. So unless anybody wants to add a quick question, I think we'll move on. No? Okay, Becky and, Jun-san. Jun, the chief engineer for, and was going to talk a little bit about what's coming up in the future for us at AESQ.
Okay, thank you, Jun-san. I'm Jun Sakai from iCheck Corporation in Japan. Thank you for participating in this Q&A session. I hope it was fun, fruitful for everyone. Before concluding today's event, I'd like to briefly touch on the next coming events so that you can plan in ahead and stay close to our AESQ activities. Please go to the next page. Firstly, you can revisit to the previous supplier forum by reviewing videos and the presentations through the AESQ website. That includes this Q&A session and the one before on the October 6th. And then the next event will be the Human Factors webinars, which will be 2 hours event to go through human factors subjects and the Q&A. It is scheduled twice on November 30th, 9 to 11 a.m. in Paris time, which suits for people in Europe and also Asia. And January 12th, the next year, 4 to 6 p.m. In Paris time, which is might be convenient for people in Europe and the United States. You can find the registration link from upcoming event page in AESQ webpage. And we have started to plan the next supplier forum in April next year. Please keep checking the AESQ website as we will be posting the information as soon as we have finalized the details. And please go to the next slide. For the involvement to AESQ activities, we are making progress to open the community of practice. Please join the AESQ community of practice on LinkedIn. There are 7 communities already active, and more should be coming soon. You can visit subject matter interest group page on AESQ website or search LinkedIn AESQ community of practice. And that's all for the future events. And this will, I think it will be the end of this Q&A session for October 2021 AESQ Supplier Forum. So I'd like to turn over to Barbara Negroes-san, AESQ chairperson, to summarize this meeting. Barbara-san.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Jun-san. Is there the next page, Becky? Okay. So yeah, so I wanted to just really, we all wanted to thank you for your time. We hope you got a lot out of this session related to question and answer. Again, hopefully you were able to watch the virtual supplier forum beforehand to be able to come in here with some background to be able to ask some questions. We wanted to connect with you personally versus just watch the video and answer questions that you had, get to know you a little bit better, have you get to know us a little bit better on what the AESQ is all about, what our vision is, what our purpose is, and what our expectations are as we deploy these standards. I can tell you that the team has really put a lot of effort into listening to the suppliers and helping to deploy. That's why we've created the RM, the reference material documents that include a significant amount of templates, examples, best practices from each of our companies or suppliers. If we've received some information from a supplier that we thought was really great, in those to be able to be used by everybody. I mean, we do really think and believe that we are stronger together than as an individual when it comes to quality and safety. We all know that we are competitors. You're competitors across the supply base, we're competitors across the OEM, but when it comes to quality and safety, we don't compete. That is something that we are passionate about across the aerospace industry, and we believe these common standards will help with simplification, standardization, and essentially commonized training to be able to have a consistent message. When each of us learn something, we add to that and then just, again, lift the entire industry versus just our own individual companies. So we are open to feedback, comments. If you'd like to see something different next time, we're able to change that up. Go into the AESQ website. There are feedback opportunities, as stated before, related to the standard and related to each of the reference materials, or just related to topics that you'd like AESQ to look into that you think would be beneficial from a supplier perspective. And we urge you from a deployment standpoint to get started. Start with step 1. We've given you an Excel spreadsheet that allows you to do kind of a gap assessment to where you are today versus the standard. Get started, start to understand your gaps, what you need to do, and create a plan that allows you to at a good pace, get there between now and the end of next year without it being a rush. This could be a cultural change within your company that needs to happen, specification changes and updates. There's definitely different gaps for each individual supplier and, frankly, each OEM that we all need to work towards to get to our end goal by the end of next year. So with that, that's all we have. Again, appreciate your time and hope that you have a fantastic day. Thank you very much.